Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we explode with thoughts on the early extinction of the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 and share our picks for the all-time biggest product blunders. Get ready for a recall because this podcast is smoking.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, where we simplify the world of marketing for humans. I'm Shad Conley, and I just need to read this quick legal disclaimer. This podcast may cause eardrum implosion, anal leakage, or irreversible demonic possession. And now let me toss it off to my co-host.
Well, as Shad mentioned, I'm Patrick Jebber, and I'm still in shock that the DeLorean made it into a top product failure. I mean, they're going to be bringing it back in 2017.
And it gave us Back to the Future. Would there be Back to the Future without a DeLorean?
There wouldn't be a time machine without the DeLorean.
They'd have to be like a Pinto or something.
Yeah, a Ford Pinto that explodes when people hit it from behind.
Exactly. So on today's episode, we're talking about the surprise demise of a major product and what the future holds for the brand behind it. Of course, I'm talking about Samsung and the Galaxy Note 7, one of the biggest new product disasters we've seen in some time. So let's talk for a second about, just Samsung and your perceptions of the brand itself, Patrick. What do you think of this brand? Say before this whole thing went down, what are your thoughts on the Samsung as a brand?
I mean, I think Samsung is a strong brand, which is why this whole exploding phones thing is really surprising to a lot of people, Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, generally, they have a lot of products and popular products, and it's a popular brand. And it's funny you say exploding phones, and that's what it's become. That's kind of like the punchline. Mm-hmm. We have these batteries that are heating up phones, and it creates this impression in your mind that, like phones just left and right are like exploding and shrapnel's flying everywhere.
Well, it puts that whole antenna gate thing that Apple dealt with a few years ago to shame,
Oh yeah, definitely dwarfs that. This is the brand fail of the moment. And I think, Samsung to me, I wouldn't say it's a clearly definable brand. It's a well-known brand. It's one of these big international brands that, make so many different products. It's hard really to separate them all that much from like a Sony or a Panasonic. Other than, I have a Samsung TV, and I remember when I went to look for TVs about 5 years ago, Samsung TVs in general really stood out to me as being some of the best quality ones at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the brand itself has really surpassed Sony and Panasonic, and all those guys have been left in the dust next to Samsung. The quality of the products have really surpassed a lot of other brands out there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's funny. It's like in the 90s or even the early 2000s, I remember like Sony being that brand. Mm-hmm. Bringing like the quality when it came to audio and video and appliances. Sony was your go-to brand, but I definitely think Samsung stepped into that role. In terms of phones, I think at one point I had a Samsung phone, but I haven't had any of their phones in such a long time. I don't even know how they compare. I know they're popular.
They're insanely popular.
Yeah, I do think especially their like flagship S7, I think is the current one, phones I think are very popular and widely used. So it's a big brand. Now, what do you think? We were just kind of talking before the show about how these, brand controversies or brand fails kind of pop up like every week now. We've just become so accustomed to it. This is obviously a bigger one on a bigger scale because it's got explosions, man. But what do you think about that, like, and how we react to those as a culture as they come up?
I guess it really depends on your relationship with the brand in question. If you have a good relationship with it, you're probably more inclined to defend it and maybe stand behind it when things go south. At the very least, you'll probably give it another chance. You know what I mean? Especially if you weren't directly affected by the quote-unquote disaster that occurred from it.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I would almost say the other side of that could be these things affect the people who have the good relationship with it more than the other people. Because the other people are already kind of irrelevant. But, like taking the whole Chipotle controversy that came up with the food poisoning and stuff, the people who ate there regularly, those are the people who might have thought, I don't know now, as opposed to the people who didn't eat there before, didn't like it before.
I would agree that it impacts them the most. I guess I should clarify that. If you are a brand loyalist, then you tend to defend it and maybe give it another chance. And if the brand is strong enough to withstand quote unquote disaster, I feel like people's memories are limited today, you know? And so
Yeah.
the Chipotle one is a great example. Time period when the disaster is happening, people tend to go, ooh, but they've done a good job of rectifying whatever the situation was, and I'll give it another try. And usually once you give it another try, you get over it because it's unlikely that it's going to happen again, unless you're Tylenol. But
No, you make a good point. It makes me think of the movie The World According to Garp, which is an old movie where he goes to buy a house. And as he's like looking at the house, a plane crashes into it. And he says, I'll take it. What are the chances of that happening again? You know?
Yeah.
It's that kind of idea there. But you're right. With these things happening so much, it's interesting now what we do is we make it such a big deal, and pounce on it. But then move on to the next thing. You know, we forget so quick. You're right. But it's just like media, you know, it gets reported like phones are exploding left and right. People are like cracking jokes and just reporting on every facet of it and what a major fail it is. And then, you know, next month we'll be talking about something different and this will be like a different memory. You know, we take it to a higher level and then it just drops out of sight way quicker.
Yeah, maybe it's because it happens so frequently now that, you know, it's the next big thing.
Oh, pretty good.
Yeah,
I know. You've been saving up. You waited to get that out, and then I just like squashed it, took all the air out of the room.
It's the next big thing. So in a minute, Shad, we're going to talk in depth about what the Galaxy Note 7 fiasco means for Samsung moving forward. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
Today's episode of Speaking Human is sponsored by Monsters Unlimited, a creative agency with a business brain. Let's face it, no one wants to consider their brand will go through a crisis like the ones mentioned on today's podcast. So when you need to build a big and wildly successful brand that can withstand the unimaginable, think Monsters Unlimited. Visit thinkmonsters.com for more information.
So let's talk a little bit about the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 controversy and what happened, you know, to just run down a quick timeline. So you basically have this new phone, the Samsung Galaxy Note 7, comes out on August 19th. Generally good reviews. I think CNET called it one of the best phones of the year. You know, people seem to like it. It's got a good buzz. Then early September, we have a first voluntary recall issue. Because of some potential battery problems, I think there was an explosion in Korea, and we're starting to see things happen a little more. Jump forward to October, the beginning of October. October 9th, Samsung stops exchanging phones. And then October 11th, just 2 days later, they issue a second recall and kill the product altogether. So the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 is dead. No longer exists. It won't be sold or supported or anything like that. If you have one, they tell you to get rid of it. This is mostly unprecedented. We don't see things like this where there's big product rollouts and then they're just bury the product a month later, or less than 2 months later, I should say. So Patrick, What do you think about this big, I mean, this is it's a big thing. It is a big thing for a brand to do. Do you think it was a good move? Do you think it was the right move?
Samsung definitely made the right choice here. I think it got to a point where it was clearly not going to be something that they could manage and maintain. And so they made the right choice. I mean, maybe a little later than they should have, but I don't think they waited too long. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, by this point, it was definitely something they had to do. The tide had turned on the phone, and consumer confidence, I think, was just gone. Mm-hmm. Especially after they do, you know, the one recall, they start sending replacements, and then there's problems with the replacements. I mean, at that point, it's just over. So the only thing to do there is stop the bleeding and move forward, which is what they did. At a great cost, though. You're talking about 1 million phones in the US, 2.5 million worldwide. And the kind of crazy thing about this was a high end, you know, it's like a phablet is what they call it because it's a big phone, but it's like an $850 phone. So this was one of the most expensive phones on the market. And to see those problems, for people who invested that money in it, to get a new phone and, start using it and invest yourself in it, and then to have to give it back is no small thing. I mean, that's kind of like, I would be annoyed as a consumer if that was me.
Yeah, and they basically told people, get rid of your phone. It wasn't like, we're going to stop selling this phone. It was like, go trade it in right now because you could die. On top of that, I had read where they were giving people a $100 credit if they traded in for another Samsung, or a $50 credit if you traded it in on another brand phone altogether, which is a huge deal in my opinion, because you're giving $50 to people who potentially will never come back to your brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, aren't even sticking with you. I saw that it was 25 for the other, but maybe they raised it.
It might be.
They're definitely trying to, immediately make good with people. It's funny though, if you go to, AT&T or one of those phone stores, you'll see a lot of people running in on fire. And
You serious? You serious?
No, and that's like, Samsung will extinguish you for free. So that's nice. No, they're doing all the things now that they've committed to this. They put the foot forward to, okay, let's bury this thing and move forward.
I think they could have gone one more round. They could have done, third time's the charm kind of marketing tactic. If you've replaced your phone twice, this time it's really not going to explode.
That's a big deal of that. They did that first recall and then they still put those phones out there that were having problems with the battery. I mean, that's kind of the big problem here for me. What kind of went wrong? That shows you mistakes were made, and it seems to have been rushed to get the phone back on the market and stop the bad buzz. And obviously, they didn't solve the problem. I still don't think they know how to solve the problem. I think that's why they ended up killing the product, was there just didn't seem like they were ready to actually figure out what was wrong with this and fix it.
From a lot of the articles I read, the engineers didn't even know what was happening with it. Huge problem, obviously. If you can't even pinpoint where the problem exists, how are you going to fix it?
Yeah, and you obviously have limited time on the market, especially with people already having these phones. You can't be like, well, we'll fix them up and we'll get back to you in 6 months. You just don't really have that kind of time in today's world. So what do you think this means for the future of Samsung phones?
Well, like I said, I think the brand can survive this. I do think that there will be a period of unrest, so to speak, in customers. That's one of the reasons why I think they may just dump the Note name altogether, that product line, and start from scratch. I mean, I think that would be probably the wisest decision that they could make. Anyway.
Yeah, I would think they'd at least lose the name. I think the thing on their side is, beyond Apple, I don't know that with phones, people generally associate them with brands as much as they do individual products, right? So like your Galaxy Note, you have the Samsung S7, S8. People know what this individual phone is, but I don't know if they'll think of the brand itself. So they're like, well, I'm never getting a Samsung phone again. They might be like, not getting a Galaxy Note again.
Yeah.
But I don't know that they'd specifically as much be like, I'm just done with Samsung phones.
When you really look deeper into the psychology of the brand, I think they're more apt to go with the Samsung brand and then not really care about the product line. I think losing the Note brand, may have some smaller repercussions, but nothing detrimental to the future of the brand.
No, you lose the name, you launch it as a new kind of product line, and if it's cool enough, people will go for it, and if it doesn't burst into flames. So I think the biggest thing is, though, I don't know if they can do it, but Samsung just needs to find out, you got 1 million people in the US who bought these phones. Who are they, and how can we make it better to them and keep them with the brand moving forward? That's going to be the tricky thing, because I think if you bought a Galaxy Note 7 and got burned by it, literally or figuratively, those are the people who will probably think twice about buying another Samsung phone. So I guess the final thing is, can Samsung recover from this?
Like I said, I think they can absolutely recover from this. It's just one of those things. Again, how you handle the situation is always going to be paramount.
Yeah, and they're going to have some problems for a while, as usually happens with these things. You take a dip, your stock takes a dive, and then usually over time you find a way to come back from it. Especially a big company like this with 1,000 different arms, where it's just like phones aren't their only business. It may hurt that arm of the business and some other ones, but it's not going to kill it like it would for a small a startup, and this is the only phone they make. On the other side of that, they're in this position right now where you have this problem and you can get past it, but they really need to be careful to avoid another kind of misstep like this. I think right now this is mostly a Galaxy Note 7 problem, but if something else happens along these lines, or even just some other embarrassment, it starts to become a Samsung problem.
For sure. They could actually make one of the features of the next phone. It puts out fires.
It's like the same phone, but they add a self-extinguishing feature.
That would be awesome.
So it bursts into flames and then it sprays itself out.
So it makes a giant mess. There's smoke in your house. It's a giant mess.
Somebody's on a plane and their phone starts smoking. They're like, don't worry, it'll take care of itself. And then it sprays everybody with that stuff.
You never know. People would be like, that's a great phone. It caught on fire and it fixed its own problem. That's the kind of technology we need.
That's what they can be like. It thinks for itself. It knows it's on fire and it puts itself out.
Good job, Samsung.
Great work, Samsung. So as Samsung works to win back consumers and make its way out of the brand penalty box, we're looking back on some of history's biggest brand embarrassments. So let's dive into our picks for the top 3 product failures of all time.
The Food and Drug Administration today broadened its warning to a nationwide level. We're advising consumers, says the warning, not to use extra-strength Tylenol until a series of deaths in the Chicago area can be clarified. 6 deaths have now been linked to the capsules, which are laced with cyanide, and late today, the manufacturer of Tylenol offered a $100,000 reward to anyone with information on who may have poisoned the pills. Max Robinson has more on the story. Max?
That was a clip from a 1982 ABC News broadcast focusing on a string of Tylenol poisoning incidents that derailed the popular product and the brand behind it. As a result of that controversy, Johnson & Johnson would famously recall 31 million bottles of Tylenol and become a case study in putting consumers first.
Yeah, that's sort of, and the Tylenol case is kind of the one that's in textbooks. When you're like in a PR class or something like that, it's often discussed in a way to do a recall right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably one of the craziest things that I've ever seen. When I went back and watched the news broadcast, it almost felt surreal the way that it was A, handled, but B, covered in the news, how everyone panicked. And I know I was alive during this, but it seems like so long ago. It's very strange.
And the story itself is pretty crazy. Like it all happened in the Chicago area, and they found these string of people just dying from Tylenol. And one of it was like one person in a family died, and then other people in that same family after the death took the Tylenol and also died. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what there were. There were something like 9 deaths, and it was these Tylenol bottles laced with cyanide, which is crazy. Obviously, just created a really big panic. The thing that's kind of different with the Tylenol case, why they came off so well from it, I think, was it wasn't like self-brought on. This was, it's believed that someone took Tylenol bottles off the shelf, opened them up, and laced them with cyanide. It didn't happen in the factories that were making them or anything like that. So the fact that then, even knowing that, Tylenol took the measure to take all the Tylenol off the market nationwide was a huge deal.
And it sparked a lot of innovations when it comes to packaging,
Yeah, no, it actually led to tamper-proof packaging.
Yeah, it's those damn bottles you can't open now because they're adult-proof.
But on the good side, no one can get the cyanide in.
Right.
From there, let's kind of jump into our biggest brand/product fails of all time. Do you want to kick it off, Patrick, with your number 3?
I will. I don't quite remember this product, Shad, but I had to put it on my list. Cocaine by Redo Beverages. Do you
I don't remember this either, but I saw it, doing research for this. I also saw that one. It's definitely a standout.
I don't think I need to justify why this was a disaster, so I won't. But this is a beverage that was pulled from shelves in 2007 from marketing itself as an energy drink, as an alternative to illegal street drugs, too, by the way. So
yeah, I don't remember this either. I don't remember if people were like, you can't call it cocaine, or what the controversy was surrounding it, if it was just a straight up flop.
It's crazy. It's a crazy concept anyway. So
people want their energy drinks to give them the feeling of cocaine, but they want it to be an unspoken thing.
Yeah, like Red Bull gives me wings. It's essentially implied that it's cocaine, but
yeah.
They don't say.
We're comfortable as a society. We're comfortable with implied cocaine, not being like, "Hey, let's go get some cocaine."
Yeah. So, what's your number 3, Shad?
My number 3 is also fairly recent. It comes from 2011, and it is Quickster. Do you remember Quickster, Patrick? Of course you do.
Oh,
Of course
yeah,
you do.
absolutely.
So Quickster was the curious and poorly communicated product split attempted by Netflix and owner Reed Hastings in 2011, where basically, in the sequence of a couple months, Netflix announced, hey, we're going to raise our prices. Then like the next month, they announced, hey, we're actually splitting our services in two. Netflix is going to be streaming content, and Quickster is where you're going to get your DVDs through the mail. So you'll have 2 separate websites and 2 different accounts. And, Netflix members were just basically like, no, I don't want to do that. Became like a big thing on the web and like a PR kind of nightmare. And then less than a month later, they're like, nah, we're not really doing that whole Quickster thing. And they just killed it. At that point, people loved Netflix. And then to get this news, they were kind of like, what are you doing?
That could have easily been a bigger disaster had they not been very transparent with their customers throughout that process. I use that actually as a case study in presentations when we talk about brand blunders, They didn't obviously think through the entire rebranding. That's the part where they failed.
Yeah, I don't think they fully thought through. And also, of course, Quickster, awful, awful name.
They probably should have thought about how bad of an idea it was, Quickster.
But they did, to their credit, recall the service before the service ever even began.
Yeah, good move, good move.
Nice job, Quickster. What's your number 2, Patrick?
So my number 2, it kind of falls a little bit in line with your number 3, and that is Betamax by Sony. We were talking about Sony just a little bit ago on the podcast. Here's the thing about Betamax. This is still one of the brands that people reference in jokes about failed formats. Like, you might actually hear someone say, I have that on Betamax, which is actually a dig. That's how you know a product failed miserably, when jokes about it transcend the product life by, decades. Again, Betamax and VHS went head to head in the early days, and then VHS caught on. And even though Betamax was a better quality than VHS. So
yeah, my uncle had both of them, and he's like, Betamax is better. Beta's better quality. Yeah. The argument I might place to you and your placement of that on this list, it wasn't a case of a product failure or a product not being innovative. It just happened to be on the losing end of that battle, I guess.
But again, biggest brand disasters, that's a pretty big brand disaster when you have a technology that is competing with another technology and yours loses.
Yeah, and you put a lot into it.
Yeah, like anything else, could kill an entire company.
Point well made. Point well made. And you're right, historically, the beta references live on.
And I love that, That's how you know.
Take your place in history.
Yeah.
My number 2 is Wow Chips.
Oh.
Released back in 1998, Lay's Wow Chips were fat-free potato chips. A chip without fat. That's amazing, right? That's what everybody thought. And sales were huge. The first year they hit the market, they did like $400 million in sales. People were like, I can eat chips all I want. And, there's no fat in them. There was just one little problem. The chips were made with Olestra, a fat substitute, with a kind of major side effect. Anal leakage.
Gives you diarrhea. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Gives you diarrhea. Probably the thing you most don't want your product associated with. You can tell people you're giving away free iPhones, but if you take one, you're going to have diarrhea forever. And people probably be like, yeah, thanks, I'm good.
Yeah.
Diarrhea and food products especially don't go together very well. So as word started to spread about that, it became one of these media things, and it became these cultural jokes. And actually the FDA stepped in and they made them put a label on the packaging of the chips that said, this product contains Olestra. Olestra may cause abdominal cramping and loose stools. Olestra inhibits the absorption of some vitamins and other nutrients. Vitamins A, D, E, and K have been added.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people were down with buying the Wow chips after anal leakage hit the market.
I really think, they missed the mark there. They really should have used those chips. Instead of making people take gross tasting laxatives, you could have a great chip experience and you could be regular.
So you think they should have embraced anal leakage?
Yeah, why not? And you could sell them in the diaper aisle, the adult diaper aisle. Win-win there.
Do you love chips and regularity? It's like chips and prunes together. Prune chips.
Tastes just like regular potato chips, but they make you crap your pants.
Food plus diarrhea, my number 2 product fail.
That's a good one. So my number 1, Shad, I tried not to use Apple in my brand disasters, but this one was impossible not to reference, mainly because it was a technology that was ahead of its time and something people really weren't ready for until today. And that is the Newton Message Pad by Apple. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily a bad idea. It just was ahead of its time. And that's sometimes your biggest enemy in a lot of product fails and brand disasters, is that technology or ideas that are ahead of its time and consumers aren't ready for will fail just like anything else.
Yeah, so do you remember what year it was that came out?
93, yeah.
So that's pretty early. You could say it's almost like a predecessor to like the iPad, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's actually a predecessor to the Palm Pilot, and then Palm Pilots led to, obviously phablets, phones, tablets, all that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, especially with technology, when you're trying to push things forward, you can be ahead of your time. The components of it can't be quite ready. Things aren't as smooth as they will eventually get to. There's always, even with smartphones, you saw there was eventually a breakthrough product that kind of pushes things through. But before you get there, you have all these products along the way, which can cost a lot of money to make. And if they don't catch on, sink the brand a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Apple will be really disappointed you only have negative things to say about them.
Yeah. So what's your number 1?
Your number 1 didn't kill people. Mine did.
Oh, good.
This, in looking these things up, was, to me, the worst brand fail I could find. Bad products, even dangerous products, are one thing, but products that actually lead to the deaths of people are another thing entirely. And that's kind of what happens with products in certain industries, like the automotive industry. And that's what happened with Firestone tires in 2000. The company recalled 6.5 million defective tires in the face of lawsuits and a federal investigation that claimed the tires would come apart at highway speeds. And these tires came standard on Ford Explorers, obviously a very popular vehicle. Some of the stats I read, and I saw a lot of different numbers for this, but it's claimed these tires may be responsible for the deaths of as many as 175 people and like over 700 injuries. And I saw some that were a little lower than that, and I saw some that were higher. And so many people say Firestone and even Ford should have caught on to the problem sooner and done something about it, or that Firestone should have done more about it, even once they knew. Just seeing those numbers kind of blew me away, especially because despite those problems, Firestone is still here selling tires in 2016, very popular brand. I guess it shows you what a brand can overcome.
And again, strong brands that are widely respected can sometimes overcome those things. And it's also just any product recalls. It shouldn't be a question of if you make the decision, obviously, because when people are dying or being hurt by things, you should just take the moral road, I guess.
Yeah, especially when you have human life in there. It's life or death.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that to me was a big one. It was just an example of, what the damage that can actually be done both to the consumer and to the brand. But also, like I said, the ability of brands to rebound from these things.
And rebound from ones that are that disastrous, where they're actually taking lives. So,
yeah, it's quite a mar on your reputation. So those are our top brand product disasters. And on that note, let's jump into our top takeaways.
Here's the deal, Shad. This is the nuts and bolts of life. And I'm going to give it to you in 1 minute or less. And then I'll never have to give another top takeaway. Because this is it. The big one. You ready?
I'm ready.
Here it is. Sometimes we fail. And by we, I mean humans. Humans, we're fallible. The things we produce can be too. So here's the key for brands to remember. While it's not ideal in any way, shape, or form for failure, like one of my favorite iconic characters from the movies, Forrest Gump, once said, "It happens." It's my best Forrest. And like that profound insight that Forrest unknowingly passed along, I pass along this. Mishaps happen. It's what you do afterwards that's important. From making the right decisions on how to react to a situation early to insanely great customer service afterwards. What you do when your brand's world is in chaos matters most. And if you put your customers first, you'll end up running and running, just like Forrest.
It's a great takeaway, other than the fact you referenced my least favorite part from the movie Forrest Gump, is when he puts his muddy face in the t-shirt and makes a smiley face.
I love that because it's so absurd. That's why I love that part.
Ridiculous. But a great takeaway, simple, but something I think brands, and especially people who work high up in brands, need to be reminded of.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need to be reminded of it, from time to time.
And it's a great lead in to my top takeaway, which is find the opportunity in the disaster. No brand wants a crisis. No company sets out to create a product that bursts into flames or causes diarrhea or injures people. But as history has shown us, it happens. Even with the best intentions, brands fail. And oftentimes, those failures are the most important moments. That's because they're transformational moments. They're opportunities to learn and grow and mold the organization into something better. And from a branding and marketing perspective, they're a chance to show people you're becoming something better. One of the reasons the Tylenol recall is considered such a success is because the Johnson & Johnson chairman effectively communicated what had happened and what the company was doing to improve. They introduced new tamper-proof packaging, which soon became the industry standard for over-the-counter medications. They privately and publicly evolved into a better company. When a crisis occurs, you can't change the past, but you can change the future. And that's exactly what strong brands do. Look for the opportunity.
Both of our takeaways paralleled each other.
And they both featured, "It happens."
It's a really important thing to remember that, a lot of good things can come out of product or brand disasters.
And in general with brands, there's most of the time you're going on about your business, you're doing your thing. It's a steady line, and occasionally you get these peaks and valleys, these big moments, which are both opportunities, whether it's incredible success or a huge embarrassment or disaster. They're all opportunities to establish what you're going to do next and where you go from there.
Yeah. So I think we covered a lot of things today for people to think about, Shad. That's it for today's episode. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast at speakinghuman.com. You can also listen and subscribe to Speaking Human on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and Google Play.
So you can get it anywhere.
Anywhere podcasts are sold or given for free.
Tweet us with your thoughts on today's episode. Let us know what you think the future holds for Samsung. Tell us what you think Samsung should call their replacement for the Galaxy Note if they choose to go that route. Or share your pick for the biggest brand disaster. At speaking_human on Twitter. That's at speaking_human on Twitter. Hopefully your device did not burst into flames while you were listening to the podcast today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.